You know, there really is nothing like a man in a well-fitted suit with a big smile. Okay, you saw that coming a mile off. Yes, I'm going to talk about the gentleman today. But not just the gentleman. I'm going to talk about suits in Sunnydale. Before we get into Buffy, I'm going to give a very abbreviated history of the suit. Before the late 1600s, men in the West generally wore a doublet with separate sleeves laced on. Fashion history had taken one of its more esoteric cul-de-sacs, and doublets were being worn really short, with a big expanse of shirt beneath and super baggy breeches. The effect was a little ridiculous, and King Louis XIV wanted to change things up. So he adopted this fashion known as the Persian coat. It was a knee-length garment with attached sleeves that buttoned up the middle. Whether it really originated from Persia or further east, we don't know. It came along the Silk Route. Anyway, the French took to it like gangbusters and started making adaptations. In 1660, when Charles II was restored to the English throne, he took the fashion with him. The English loved it too, and when they crossed the coat with the doublet, they created a new fashion, the vest. For the next century, these garments evolved together. Breeches became less baggy and more streamlined. The old Tudor fashion of displaying a clean white linen at the cuffs and the neck continued to be really important. There were a lot of changes in the 1800s with the Regency and the Victorian era. People started to get super into gendering everything, and they decided that decoration and fanciness was only for girls. From then on, men's fashion would be more plain and austere, but they still wanted to know who was rich, and more than that, who was high class, who had taste. So fashion became all about the little details. The lapel shape, the cut, the length, the kind of neckwear you wore. And that's sort of been the story of suits since that point. Little changes and alterations, but overall, day wear has settled into two basic shapes. There is the three-piece suit with the jacket, vest, and trousers, and the two-piece suit with a jacket and trousers. So that's a very broad view on the evolution of the suit and how we got to here. The suit has always had connotations of masculinity, of power and elitism. Masculinity, power, and elitism. There ought to be a word for when those things collide. So generally when we see suits in media, it's often used to convey those sorts of ideas. Now let's look to Buffy. Who wears the suits in Sunnydale?
Snyder!
Well, the first person is Principal Flutie. Poor Flutie. It's not a great suit. Kinda cheap. Not sure if this was ever fashionable. Definitely wasn't when Buffy was filmed. It's not well suited in a series of, bad ties. So Principal Flutie is an authority, but not in an effective or imposing way.
He was eaten. You're in my world now.
Enter Principal Quark. Here he is instantly more buttoned down. He's still old-fashioned, but it's more a classic 50s look. It's distinctly more ordered. Very tidy. That's Snyder. He's all about the order.
This is not orderly. It's the kind of woolly-headed liberal thinking that leads to being eaten.
There's definitely more of an air of authority than with Flutie. Buffy is still dismissing him, but he poses an actual challenge. The last principal is Robin Wood, but I'll come back to him at the end.
By wise counsel.
The next group of suited men is Giles and the Watchers. Oh, Giles, you sexy fuddy-duddy you. I'm going to give you your own video sometime, I promise. For now, I will say keep an eye out for how buttoned up he is, or how loosened and how much of his suit he takes off. When it comes to the other Watchers, we have Quentin Travers, whose suits are deeply old-fashioned. Antique old-fashioned. His suits are made from expensive tweed, the kind you hand down for generations. The cut of his coat here would not be out of place in the 20s or 30s. On his return in Checkpoint, his suit isn't quite so antique, yet again, quality tweed. Classic cut. His colleagues are mostly wearing classic, rather imposing suits. This guy I'm not so sure about. Doesn't he look like a Bond villain from the 60s? Some of the background folks look a bit budget accountant, but I think that's a function of budgeting this episode. The overall effect is a mass of suits. If we look to color, we can see Travers and most of the Watchers are a mass of neutrals. In the world of Buffy, the Council aren't black hats or white hats. They are, effectively, a cloud of beige. The interests they serve are their own. So what do the Watchers have to tell us about authority and Buffy's relationship to it? Well, the Watchers' Council are old. As old as Empire, likely. And like Empire, it is long-established authority. It's power that comes from tradition.
But it's been done this way for a dozen centuries.
And traditional power without compassion can be devastating. Yet, when Giles refuses to go along with it, and when Buffy stands up to it,
there isn't going to be a review.
That traditional power fades. Eventually, it's irrelevant. Now, I couldn't possibly talk about Watchers without talking about Wesley.
Wesley Wyndham Price.
Oh, Wes, my dear, what an arc you'll have. But that will come later, and on a different show. Wes starts out looking like a boy in his father's suit. It's not even that the suit is big, it's the way he carries himself in it. There are some great details in Wes's suits. If you look closely, you see the white collar on a striped shirt that was very popular in the 80s, with the yuppies particularly. The bright ties and matching pocket square are also very yuppie. Yuppies were mostly bright, ambitious young men who often came from privilege. They had the same conservative politics as their parents, but in a new style. So he's connected to the old power, but in a new style. And it's not a style Buffy has any use for. It's kind of hard to look at authority through Wes, because Buffy never treats him as an authority figure at all. He's a young man trying to assert his authority purely based on who he's connected to. And when he's not useful to those connections,
the Council is not welcome here.
They will drop him in a hot minute.
Get some help here!
So that's the Watchers.
What a lot of fun.
Sunnydale. Town's got quaint.
Hello, Mr. Trick. Damn, I love this man's suits. The color, the style, he is killing it, and he knows it.
Well, clothes make the man.
When you have a form like the suit, with a set pattern and expected presentation, it becomes this thing you can subvert. You can twist and reform. Take the thing and make it your own. It's very late 80s, early 90s, and has its roots in black culture, specifically in the ballroom culture of New York. So if you've never seen Pose or Paris is Burning, and you should, the ballroom culture was a place for gay and trans people of color in the late 80s, early 90s. It was a vibrant, beautiful, colorful explosion. And looking at Mr. Trick and his suits and his attitude, and I wonder, maybe it's just my headcanon, but I want to see that man vogue. It's a shame he falls so easily into the mayor's shadow and is gone so soon.
No, this is no good at all.
More on the mayor in a minute, but first, thinking of Mr. Trick makes me think of somebody else. Oh, what a beautiful suit. A zoot suit, in fact, in 2 colors. Sweets is another trickster. His look evokes the fashion of the Jazz Age, performers like Cab Calloway or the Nicholas Brothers. Like Mr. Trick's 90s look, the zoot suit fashion evolved in black and Latino culture. The zoot suit particularly was a challenge to authority, being loud and ostentatious, taking up space and being colorful in a world that wanted them to be invisible. There was a literal zoot suit riot in 1943 when white men were so outraged by the idea of zoot suits that they roamed the streets of LA attacking men who wore them. Yes, that happened over a style of suit, because suits are never just suits. Fashion is never just fashion. So back to Sweets and Mr. Trick. Are they representations of authority in their bright, beautiful suits? No, they're tricksters. They undermine authority. They destabilize the established order. But in the story, they destabilize things too much. Think about Band Candy and Once More with Feeling. The established order turned to complete chaos, and Buffy has to try and make some sense of it all. In Homecoming, the chaos is confined to Buffy and Cordy, but still, chaos. Who but Mr. Trick would think of an idea like Slayerfest 98?
Please, let me.
Okay, I may have a new ship. He, of course, is the other trickster, though he doesn't wear a suit. As a posh white man, it's harder to put him in a suit and have it look subversive or in any way challenging to authority. So you strip him back, put him in a silk shirt, worn open, with jewelry. Generally a look that puts me in mind of David Bowie in his thin white Duke phase. Bowie borrowed a lot of influences from the Zoot suitors and the ballroom culture. Oh, and was totally bi. I mean, we all get that Ethan is queer-coded, right? That's not a thing that needs explaining. I think we have to take a moment to think about the fact that in this story, our agents of chaos are a queer-coded character, a black character, and a black-coded character. They are challenges to authority here, and not in the way that our plucky little heroine is. They are dangerous agents of disorder. I am not saying at all that this is deliberate on the part of the writers. I think absolutely it's not. This is a part of the culture that Buffy was written in. So those are our beautiful, beloved, somewhat problematic tricksters.
See you home.
Well, gosh.
So here we are with Mayor Richard Wilkins III. The mayor's suits are quite a change from Mr. Trick. He's actually more in line with Quentin Travers. Again, his suits are reminiscent of a bygone time. In his case, it's the 1950s. The style does fit in the fashions of 1999. The 50s touches are spread here and there. The rust color of his ties, the shape of his ties, the cut and fabric of his shirts. It has a very Leave It to Beaver, Andy Griffith, 50s TV look. Even when he dresses casually, it has a very 1950s establishment look. Of course, that 50s TV dad is totally the mayor in a nutshell.
I'm a family man.
He's charming, he's likable, as long as you go along with what he wants and serve his interests. Wear the dress, appreciate his gifts properly, and you get cookies and milk. Try to be independent or challenge his authority in any way, and...
Faith! You know I don't like repeating myself.
So in the mayor, we have authority that seems pleasant, even caring, at least on the surface, but isn't willing to let you grow up. And beneath the pleasant mask lies something much, much darker. I said I would get to them, and here we are. Enter the gentleman. So let's look at them a bit closer. Okay, give me a second here. Better. Okay, let's look at the suits. Joss Whedon has gone on record saying he wanted them to have a Victorian look. And I love how Cynthia Bergstrom and the wardrobe department have interpreted this. The pieces are Victorian, but generally not tied to a specific time. I went down a bit of a rabbit hole on the Victoriana stuff, and this video is getting very long, so I shall try and put some links in the video description. Briefly, the coat's length and cut are a style popularized in more of the 1840s. The collar is known as an Aberdeen collar, if you look at the curve, and the neckwear is either a silk puff or a silk imperial. Both of these were 1880s styles. Some designers might mash together 40 years of style by accident, but not Bergstrom. She's too good for that. Look at the flashbacks. She does her research. This is a choice, because this isn't history. This is a fairy tale. It doesn't need to be accurate. It needs to create a feeling. And boy, what a feeling it creates. If they actually looked Victorian, the shape would be less angular and there would be more color. This is more like trying to create the shape of a modern suit with Victorian pieces. In fact, the style inspiration I would most look to...
You know what the difference is between you and me? I make this look good.
You're not wrong.
The feeling that I get is as if these suits have been put together by someone who knows in theory how suits work, but hasn't seen them on an actual human body. And it fits, because this looks like somebody who knows in theory how smiles work, but the creepy is the point, of course. Everything about The Gentleman is aimed squarely at the uncanny valley, and oh, they hit. Putting aside the fairy tale of it all, what does this tell us about authority and Buffy's relationship to it? Well, to begin with, the gentlemen are a group, not an individual. There really isn't anything individual about them. They are precise in every detail. Look at the pocket squares. They are identical. There must have been so much ironing on this set. They are in perfect black and white. Even the cufflinks are white. Remember in the history bit, I talked about how an immaculate white cuff is a very old signifier of being a gentleman. So we have a faceless group who are precise and aloof, who feel timeless and have an army of brainless functionaries to do their dirty work. Now, isn't that just how institutional power feels when you're young? When you first have to deal with taxes and bills, with government and bureaucracy, and it can all feel overwhelming and, well, faceless. These things tend to have a history and tradition.
It's what we do.
Like the power represented by the Watchers' Council, and often a paternalism, like the mayor. But in those cases, there were individual bad behaviors. This is the system. It's not personal. And when it goes wrong, it can feel like it's cutting your heart out. And it most definitely can leave you feeling voiceless. The thing about systems like this is when the voiceless find their voice. The system trembles.
I'm gonna be the best principal ever.
Like I said at the start, there really is nothing like a man in a well-fitted suit. 'Cause, damn. Okay, I'll be serious. But can you blame me? The suits, right, the suits. They are pretty too. Though I would argue that it is a change that the man wearing the suits is objectively very handsome. No offense to Flutie or Snyder or any of the other men, but few humans look this good. The rest of them aren't framed for their beauty. His suits are part of that framing. They are well made, tailored, and look expensive. He's also quite casual with them. Often we see him in just a shirt and tie, and yet, even then he has a sense of authority anyway. And though his suits are lightly colored, they're not the bright, shocking colors of Mr. Trick or Sweet, and are far more modern and fashionable than anything the council would wear. And things should be different, because Buffy is a grown-up now, and has a different relationship to authority than she did as a teenager. As an adult, sometimes you work with authority. Sometimes you are authority. And so here is Robin, in authority, and an ally. Not, as it turns out, the most reliable ally. He tends to think he knows what's best, or he'll put his own interests first. Take note, when he betrays Buffy's trust here, he's not wearing a suit. He strips down on camera to a vest. I noted in the Xander video that in this story, taking clothes off is often a way to get to honesty. And from this point, there are no more suits for Robin. In the end, he is humbled, and he tries to be a better ally. At least he does his part in the final battle.
Surprise.
In Buffy's story, suits act as a window on her evolving relationship to authority. At times, it's a thing to be dismissed. At other times, it's a challenge to overcome. Sometimes the challenge is greater than other times. Sometimes it feels almost too much. Sometimes it's an ally, but not one to be trusted blindly. That's a lot to get from variations on one kind of outfit, but that suits for you. Deceptively simple, but look closer, and there's so much more.
Made with care for Randy.
Randy Giles?